Welcome back to Technology and Discipleship. We're so glad you're here. Today, we are going to be talking about some AI 101 of the lingo, learning the lingo. Now, in previous episodes, we talked a little bit about hallucinations. We talked a little bit about prompting. So we're not going to get really into that, definitions of LLMs, things like that. But we do have a list of some common definitions that you might find yourselves hearing or discussing. Now, our overall sort of laughable goal here is we kind of defined it as hopefully after this podcast episode, you can find yourself at a party and overhear some people talking about AI and have enough conversational knowledge to be able to sort of understand what's going on, maybe even give some input.
I was going to say impress your kids or teenagers.
Impress your kids, yeah. Though everybody I talk to, it's their kids coming to them saying, you don't know what you're doing. I know way better about AI than you do, which is TikTok is kind of the source of a lot of the tutorials right now.
That's true.
Yeah. But anyway, that's what we're here for. So my name is Blake. I am the executive director of our marketing and delivery and our AI lead for Discipleship Ministries. And Scott, I'll pass the ball to you.
Scott Hughes, associate general secretary for Discipleship Ministries.
Wonderful. Well, Scott, tell us a little bit about today. I'm looking at my notes here. We have an overview. Do you want to walk through that?
Yeah, we're going to, as you said, we're going to talk through the basic lingo when it comes to prompting. What exactly is an LLM? The difference between AGI or artificial general intelligence versus artificial generative intelligence. Am I saying that correctly?
I think so, yeah.
Generative and general are confusing me in the moment, but there's a big difference between those two, and we'll talk about that in this episode and preview of things to come. In the next episode, we'll talk a little more about why that might be scary. So yeah, let's begin. Let's just hop into what is AI, because when people hear that, they have all sorts of things going on in their mind of what that means. So when someone says AI, what exactly are we talking about?
So what we're talking about is sort of the marketing term. I met with, there's a professor at a university here that they're starting their own AI first master's degree program. And I met with them to kind of talk through what they're doing. And he admitted to me, the correct terminology for this would be a lot of engineering and machine learning. But because AI is just the phrase that is all over the place right now, all of our apps, all over everything, it's the Xerox. Yeah. He said, a lot of my engineering students and faculty are frustrated by the fact that we're using AI because it's not always the correct terminology, but it's sort of the blanket statement that if you see on your resume, this person has a master's degree in applied AI technology, everybody's going to know that that is a general overview of a knowledge of artificial intelligence. And if you want to dive into machine learning and things like that, you can. But that's why we call everything AI. And I promise you, we've gotten messages of people, well, don't you mean machine learning? And we'll say yes in a lot of instances. However, people are looking for AI. They're talking about AI. This helps us to get people kind of on that same page. Scott, did you have any perspective to share about that?
No, but I think that's correct in terms of we need to be specific when talking about, with our church folks, of when we say we're using AI, we don't just mean some robot thing that has, we're talking about a machine learning capability, specifically LLMs. So if someone says used an LLM, what exactly are they talking about, Blake?
Well, that's a large language model. And so that's most of what our conversations revolve around right now, because there's a lot of AI, machine learning, large language model technologies. The LLMs are the ones that we most frequently use and train on, because right now at this current time, that is the tool that really is helpful to a lot of our people.
So ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, Gemini, Copilot, these are all LLMs, correct?
Yes, all large language models. And a lot of them are back-end connected to a lot of other apps. But that's really what we're talking about, is the generative text large language model platforms.
And it's a bit like an orchestra conductor who has all this data that they're able to pull from and draw to build patterns and do really advanced predictive text. If you think on your phone, you put in I'm going to, and it's going to give some predictive text of what that next thing is. It's like that on steroids maybe more than that, in terms of the patterns that it's drawing of next word technology. And so it looks like we use these human personified phrases of it's learning or it's saying or it's doing these things when it's just doing mathematical equations. It's breaking words down into math, doing the math, and putting them back into words. I hear people say, it looks like the work of fairies. It's not. It is still machines. There's no gypsies, no anything else involved there.
Right. Still coding generated, programmed, and vastly improving every single day, which is amazing.
And so how we interact with these, usually, at least right now, is through prompting. So you'll hear people talk about prompting. Hey, what prompt did you use? So what exactly is a prompt and what do you do with it, Blake?
So a prompt is essentially the text that you will put into a large language model. Anything. Now, people talk about prompting, and usually when they're referring to being a prompt engineer, working with prompts, they're talking about large, tailored, and intentionally structured prompts that give a desired result. And anything that you put into a large language model is technically a prompt. So if I said, tell me what you're feeling today, if I wanted to just kind of play with the large language model, that is a prompt. That basic question is a prompt. If I put in a 2.5-page outline that is coded and includes very specific if this then that instructions and detailed outputs and desired outcomes, that also is a prompt. I would say if somebody refers to themselves as a prompt engineer, they're more talking about they're building sort of the latter of that. But if you said, I had a conversation with a large language model, well, you just gave it prompts and then received an output.
Yeah, that's how we interact with it. And sometimes it is through voice. We can do that through voice. Yeah. We can do that through text. So as you begin to learn prompting techniques, one of the things that Blake has done, just to give advertisement to our webinars, is he's built some prompting templates to help people do that work of prompt engineering. He's simplified that. Just a quick advertisement for that. And then in our advanced course, Blake takes that to the next level of building personas. So what's a persona, Blake, and why would you have that?
Well, so I'll add on to that. There's a phrase you'll hear where I'm going to blend into our next topic a little bit about GPTs, because you will hear the term a GPT, and you probably noticed that's Chat GPT also has GPT in it, which makes it a little bit confusing. But a persona, I'm bouncing around here, is essentially a prompt structure that creates sort of I'll give this example. This is the example I use in the advanced course. Scott said a conductor a moment ago. I call it the organist. And it is essentially with these large language models, they're so knowledgeable that our job in prompting is to narrow down the need and the specific targeted goal that we need them to achieve. What a GPT and a persona does is it is a prompt that positions the GPT as an expert with the goal of a specific task. Yeah. And that is the same thing for the GPT, a custom GPT on ChatGPT. It's just a feature that they added on OpenAI's large language model platform that is a premium feature, and it gives you access to a GPT so you could build that persona into a custom GPT. And then it's a chat that is saved, so you don't have to manually tell it how you want it to act every time. You just click on the new chat and you've saved your little GPT. And those can be anything. I have a kitchen assistant. I have a garage assistant that I have given context of all of my users' manuals for all of my tools and lawnmower and vehicles. That's what I'm talking about. Is a persona. The garage assistant, for instance, is a persona as a that always references the user's manuals when I ask it to perform a task. You better believe I have one for this podcast that has fed in all of the content that we've ever taught about and said, hey, use this as context to help us design with special instructions of how I like our podcast notes to be laid out, and it helps us build that. And
so right now, I believe even there is free access to GPTs, but in order to create your own GPT is when you have to have the premium version. And one of the questions I get is, when should I do that? And for me, it's, when do you do something often? Like when you repeat something, that's usually a good indication of perhaps I should build a GPT to help me do this. So that's GPT. So let's transition then and talk about the scary stuff that we're going to talk about in the next episode, artificial general intelligence versus, we've been talking
AGI.
About generative, things that generate. What's the difference between that and artificial general intelligence?
Well, you probably will hear it in conversation referred to as AGI, which is just exactly what Scott just said, artificial general intelligence, but people just say AGI, and it's a very big trigger word right now. Basically, the interesting thing is the basic definition, as I've found, is when these technologies get to the point where they have the ability to have a sort of baseline of a human level of knowledge and can research and essentially grow on their own without additional human programming. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's a bit of kind of an autonomous, though that might not be the correct term, because, and here's the reason I'm kind of going, is because if you were to go to a forum or you were going to go to a subreddit to learn about what AGI means, there's a lot of argument because there's not really a specific definition of what AGI is, except the baseline is a level of human knowledge that allows it to research and grow on its own. And there's a lot of companies kind of arguing about how and bragging they're going to be the first one to get there, which is funny because we still don't have a real firm definition of what it is.
Right. And so one of the other things you may hear is open and closed models. And in any form, the models that we have now are pre-trained, right? They're not going off and on their own researching and doing data analysis. They have to be pre-trained. There's human in the loop currently. AGI is no human in the loop. And that's where things can get scary. We'll talk about that in the next episode. Let's move on and talk about image generation and video generation, because it's not just about language. It's people are also using these tools. Ministry leaders are using these tools for image generation, whether it's sermon PowerPoints, other things, or I think eventually we're going to see video generation in the next year or so. So what do people mean by that? How does that work? Go for it, Blake.
Yeah. I would say we're already seeing video generation. There was it's about 6 months ago, there were people saying, it's going to be 2 or 3 years before we see text to video generation. And then a month later, some of these companies released, we're already there. And so that already exists in very small spurts. But essentially, just like large language models, they find statistical correlations between what they think the predictive next word will be. It works the same way with pixels. So they'll take kind of a static image of the pixels and try to regenerate what they think the pixel next to it would look like, which is why we've had a lot of issues with, people with 6 hands, because if you're looking at the hand as a whole, you can say, that's 6 hands. That's incorrect. But if you're looking at pixels itself and what pixel should come next to the other pixel, that's hard, because I'm looking at the pixel here, then the pixel here is there's a finger next to it. So then that would mean that I'd assume that maybe right here, there's another pixel of a finger next to that. Gets a little complicated, but it's improving drastically and getting to the point where it's much, much better outputs every single day at this point.
It is. And the text in images is getting better. For a while, you'd get gibberish, but now you're actually getting text that looks authentic. So text to speech is also something that's coming up, is you're able to type out words and then your voice recorded comes across as your voice, even though you didn't actually say those things. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's the platform we're recording this in right now, Riverside, just released a feature where it will listen to what I have recorded in these podcasts, just my track. It doesn't listen to yours, Scott. Now, you could probably log in and get your own, but it'll listen to my track. I can give it up to 2,000 characters, and it will, based on the reference of my voice, try to recreate whatever I type. Now, I tried to kind of just as a test record a story for my son this morning, and it said, this is a story about a kangaroo. And it's just very, it's very like, what's that Max head? What it was the
Max
head, yes. So it's getting
there was
there.
A Billy Joel song too that did
probably, but I mean, it's not there yet. However, this creates some really amazing opportunities and some serious concerns. So just be aware of that.
Yes, right. And that's the next thing you're going to hear about is deep fakes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know what deepfakes are, you need to know, because at this point, let's just use this build off the last thing. If I were to somehow gain access to your voice, record your voice, and then do text to speech, and then use that against you as blackmail. Hey, Blake said these very dangerous things, right? That's a deepfake. You're using it in unauthorized ways. We've seen this just barely in the current. This is when we're recording this. You've seen this barely. Who knows what'll happen later on. But we know there's other countries that are trying to do this and spread misinformation through deepfakes. And so have a bit of skepticism when you see something that doesn't look just right. Or I would even say, if it confirms your previously held belief, be suspicious that it might be deep fake. It may not be what actually someone said. It may not be a video or a image that actually happened. That's the world we live in. It's unfortunate. There's great possibilities with this technology, and it can be used for harm.
I mean, at the time of this recording, I believe that we're recording this about 2 weeks before it's going out. Just last week, a presidential candidate created imagery of certain very noticeable figures endorsing their campaign.
Oh, yes, I did see that.
It wasn't true. It was just absolutely fabricated, and
I think most people knew that.
I think so.
Thankfully.
However, but think about that's easy to catch, because most people would say, oh, well, that person probably wouldn't endorse that person, and there's some lawsuits now happening. But think about that on a macro scale of massive amounts of people creating little posts everywhere. And I've noticed on Facebook, for instance, I'm not a huge Facebook guy, but when I do log in and scroll down, the percentage of AI generated graphics, cartoons, images is drastically increasing.
Prevalent.
That's the downside, is the ability to mislead. And that's where, again, when we come into ethical and policy use, misleading, don't use this in any misleading ways. The beauty of that is we do have other sides. For instance, at Discipleship Ministries, we have a giant backstock of really relevant and useful booklets and materials we've used. Would it be helpful to people if we created some audio versions for people to learn in the car while they're driving? And in a, I feel like my age and younger, we're not reading booklets quite as much. A lot of us are. I'm not going to make a huge general statement, but I know that the audiobook need has grown. And so would that be, if a church, if you have something you wrote, you don't have a lot of staff to really record something, would that be helpful? That's something we have to decide. And also keeping in mind applicable laws in the state of Tennessee, the Elvis law just passed, which is essentially to protect artists' voices so that they don't accidentally or maliciously have what I tried to do this morning, which is a recreation of my voice. So it's sticky and also potentially amazing. We're going to have a wild ride. Both of those things.
So what didn't we cover? I hope you'll tell us in the comments, what else do we need to cover when it comes to basic lingo? What has come up in your conversations that you go, ooh, I need to know more? Or perhaps your kids have said something that you want to know more. Let us know in the comments, or you can email us at our Discipleship Ministries email address. We'd love to make sure and address your comments. Ultimately, our hope is to leverage these tools for discipleship. I'm hearing more and more stories about that as I talk with my pastor friends, and during our courses, we're hearing testimonies for that. So we're thankful. So thanks for joining us for this episode. Anything else you got, Blake?
I mean, I would say just keep in mind, our next episode coming out, we're going to kind of extend this conversation into some fears and concerns, and a lot of the common fears we've heard, and some perspectives on, well, maybe it's not so bad as you're thinking, and maybe it's amazing, and let's not live in fear. Maybe it's worse. Maybe it's better. We don't know.
I think it'll be both. I think it
will be.
Maybe we'll expand and get you a little afraid, and then we'll hopefully end on a positive note.
And how we can influence that as Christian leaders, because that's part of the, how can we bring hope into that? So that's our next episode. But thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you being here, and we will see you in the next one.
Peace.